But tell us more about your story. I'm very curious because how did you enter the YouTube scene? And I think you were one of the early
Mm.
ones. I mean, obviously, it took a while to get that sort of attraction, and today you are where you are.
Yeah, it. So I don't know if I'm one of the early ones, but there are quite a few people like AKTK. I think he started before me. I'm not sure, but there's a few people who came before me. But yeah, I did start in what 2018, and I came into it. My story is actually quite similar to a lot of other non-left YouTubers as well. I don't know if you'll be able to relate to it because I feel like a lot of people who make this kind of content on this side of the political aisle, they have very similar stories. So I grew up in a fairly culturally aware family. I was fortunate in that sense that both my mother and my father, they weren't overtly religious, but they were very culturally aware. They were very uh, insistent on me knowing exactly my cultural background, knowing where I come from, knowing what my cultural heritage is, and why it's important to acknowledge it, why it's important to love it, why it's important to respect it, and why it's important to preserve it. So that part was very fortunate because I happened to just be born into that family. Second part,
Right.
obviously, when I entire family is from Bihar, so I was born and raised in Patna, and my dad went to when we were living in Delhi for a certain period of time, and I went to school. My high schooling I did in Delhi, and then when I was in high school in Delhi, that's when I started to come into contact with certain teachers and certain students and certain ideas that didn't really jive with either my experience or the way or what I'd read about India and what I'd read about, the Indian culture and things like that. I would hear these my teachers make these claims that wouldn't really make sense to me, and then I'd go talk to my dad and my mom about it, and they'd be like, "Kya bol rahe tumhare teacher yaar?" And especially about like Indian history, about like Indian names and stuff like that. One of the earliest examples I remember is there was a Sikh student in my class, and he was trying to explain to the teacher. His name was Harpreet. He was trying to explain to the teacher what Harpreet means. He was saying Hari ki preet, and the teacher corrected him and said, "No, no, this is wrong. This is a Hindu interpretation of a Sikh name. The
Acha.
name actually Harpreet means jo har sabse pyar karta hai, who loves everybody. That is what Harpreet basically means." And I told that to my father, and he had a big, huge laugh about it because he didn't consider that a huge deal at that point. He just laughed it off. But then, you hear more and more
Yeah.
of this kind of obfuscation when I went to study in Delhi University. I heard much more of it because I went to Hindu college, and right across the street from Hindu college, if you're familiar with the North
Yeah.
Campus of DU at all, is St. Stephen's.
Right.
And in St. Stephen's and right next door to Hindu College, there was the Delhi School of Economics canteen. So we used to always go to the DSE canteen and eat a bunch of food, and we would get to interact with students from all over the North Campus area. And we'd often run into these, kurta wearing, khadi jhola carrying folks,
Yeah.
or people from sort of the richer strata of Delhi society, from South Delhi, Gurgaon students that would tell me all kinds of things about India, about Hindu culture, about India's, indigenous traditions that just sounded completely wrong to me. I said कि यार मैंने तो कभी ऐसे होते हुए नहीं देखा जो आप लोग describe कर रहे हो.
Correct.
So I had a lot of arguments and back and forth between those people. And when I moved overseas, I initially lived in New Zealand for a little while. Again, a lot of the same misconceptions. And finally, when I moved to the US, again, a lot of the same misconceptions. So I was like, what is going on? Like, why is basically the rest of the world have so many misconceptions about India
Yeah.
that many Indians know to not be true at all? And so I thought, well, I speak to my friends and my family about these sorts of issues. Let me try and speak to a larger audience, and maybe I can change a few people's minds, or maybe I can influence a few people. And that's basically how I started making videos on YouTube, because I was like, yeah, koi sunega, nahi sunega, I don't know. But let me at least try to put my voice out there
Right.
and see what I think and push back and see what happens.